Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, one and all, to another round of the book reviews. Today, I have the book for you, Homer's The Odyssey, or Odyssey. I'm not really sure if the actually goes in there or not. Now, you're lucky if you're watching on the video, you're not going to get the full Kyrin experience of taking off the shirt and acting like a Greek god, because I just don't feel like doing a ton of editing for this video. So you're welcome if you're watching the video that you don't have to see that. However, let's get into the book. This book was written in around about the 8th century BC, and interesting enough, nowadays the scholars don't believe it was actually written by one person, by Homer, by a single individual, and they believe it's more like the Bible or something like that, where it's a collection of many stories put together and going down through a huge oral tradition. So interesting enough, even though it's written by Homer, it seems that nowadays that's not particularly believed that it was solely written by one person. Now, the book goes over the general story of Odysseus and his returns to home after the Greek war in Troy. And it's basically the Trojan War, I should say. And it's the book varies, I guess, between his comings to home and then also the strife that his son Telemachus and his wife Penelope are in, and I guess like their fight, their internal battle with the suitors who claim to try and woo Penelope and claim that Odysseus is dead and that she should choose one of them. And basically due to the Greek concept of hospitality, they get into this position where they have to accept the suitors. They can't drive them off. But it's also like, as far as the cultural norms go, Penelope needs to remarry or denounce or something like that her claim to the Odysseus's household and his possessions and all these other things. So it's like this weird interwoven story where there's all these people trying to claim all of his wife, his possessions, and things like that, even though he's not dead, but he has been gone away from home for like 20 years. So there is a reason as well where, maybe they have a little bit of a claim to trying to do this. And Penelope somewhat encourages them at the start as well. So it's also understandable of why they are doing what they're doing, but it's also bad. Don't do that. So they were taking advantage of the hospitality of Telemachus and Penelope and were, eating all of his food and behaving arrogantly, basically in his house. And so I'll cut to the end. It's a happy story. He gets his vengeance on the suitors and he lives happily ever after, basically. But he goes through a tremendous period of trials to get up to this point. And that's what the book is about. It's about Odysseus's trials. And I guess it is one of the core poems or books nowadays in the Greek mythology and what happens there. So I won't go through all of that. That's tremendous amount of tiny details and stories and monsters and all these sorts of different things. So I'll get on to the actual themes of the book. So one of it is, what is a hero? Who is a hero and what do they do? And so you'd maybe think like, okay, a hero is someone who protects other people. But in the book, Odysseus, all of his companions on his boat trip, all of his fellow soldiers, they die. A lot of them horrible deaths, getting eaten by monsters, getting struck down, being turned into pigs, falling needlessly to their death. And so you'd sort of say, okay, maybe Odysseus isn't like someone who helps other people, but he's more of a hero and he has, super admirable qualities, and that's what a hero is. But then you also see like, okay, no, wait, he's just full of rage. He is very arrogant. He's very deceitful, tricky, and he does, some very, very questionable things. He's, I wouldn't say he's the epitome of a hero, but nevertheless, I guess what you can take from it is there's no two heroes that are alike. And also a hero is not someone who is infallible, who is the most, like, the greatest person ever. Superman, for example, he has negative qualities. Batman has negative qualities. Name any of, like, the modern day comic book heroes, and all of them have certain aspects to them which you would say, okay, that's not a very admirable quality. You wouldn't want that to be something to be striven for as a role model for other people. So one of the things, I guess, just to take from that is, and that's what makes it interesting. That's what makes a hero someone that you want to look up to and read about and know more about, because it is someone who, isn't the epitome of perfection, but they have their own flaws and how they overcome these flaws and how they learn and grow and do different things. So that's, I guess, just one thing to take from the book. If you're reading it and are expecting a traditional, who even knows what a traditional hero is, but if you're expecting perfection from Odysseus, do not be surprised when he does a lot of dumb things. Now, another one is the call of home and what drives us to move, especially if you're moving countries or moving to a new culture, if you're, a refugee in another country, or if you're essentially translating yourself from one place to another, one land to another. And for me personally, I think it's always going to be a negative thing. I don't think there's that many people who would willingly move from where they were born to somewhere else, unless they could see, like, the benefits and say, yes, this is 100% better. So just for me personally, while I was traveling around South America, Central America, North America, I personally could see, like, okay, there is a huge amount of negative, steps or negative disadvantages I would have to overcome to move to, say, let alone like a third world country, but even a first world country, because there's just so many different things you have to, energy you have to expend. You have to maybe learn a new language. You have to make new friends. You have to fit into the culture. You have to like the food. You have to, there's so many just layers and layers and layers. So, I think that is what drives us, most of us, to I guess, stay where we were born and live where we were born, is because that it's not so much that there's, greater things elsewhere. It's more that there's huge, tremendous negatives to actually doing that. And it takes a lot of effort to do that. Now, I'm not saying that, people shouldn't move or whatever. Refugees are in a war-torn country. That's a very, very good excuse to try and move and create a better life, and creating a better life. Totally understand that. But I personally think that, let's just do an imaginary scenario in 20, 30, 100 years where everyone has the, I guess, like, minimum standard. Everyone lives to, say, the standard that the average Australian would. How many people would actually want to move to another country, to somewhere else? I would predict it's probably small. Going on vacations, tasting different places is amazing, totally cool. But fully moving there and committing to a new life, it requires a lot of effort. So that was just an interesting thing. And we can see this with Odysseus. Like, he has many times where he could have stayed with one of the goddesses who was seducing him. He could have stayed in with the Phaeacians and lived a very good life there. He could have done, numerous times where he could have stayed somewhere, but he always had this drive, this longing to go to home, to be with his wife and his son, to see his parents again, to be in Ithaca where he grew up, where he was the king. So that was just an interesting little theme there. And then the last one is hospitality and how the Greeks did their hospitality back in those days. And basically they were very, very hospitable. You could see this with the suitors, where even though they were being arrogant jackasses, there was still this underlying culture where you need to take care of your guests because you are the host. And you'd see this all throughout the book. And there was numerous examples where the gods would punish those who were shit hosts, who were behaving badly, who didn't take care of their guests. And, it was just interesting that this could also be abused and sometimes even result in very unforeseen, unwitting tragedies. For example, the Phaeacians who take an Odysseus, who, like, give him riches, give him a safe path home, And yet this angers one of the gods, and they, strike them down, turn their boat to stone, and close off their beautiful city from the world, so they can no longer travel via boat to the outside world. So, what to take from that, I'm not too sure, but it's just interesting seeing how hospitality is very different from one culture to another. Now, my own personal observations. I felt this book actually had a lot of greater character development than the Iliad. And why this was, I think it was mostly the theme, the setting of the actual book. It focused more on Odysseus, and so you had to follow him through his trials. And, it sort of did the same thing in the Iliad with Achilles, but that one introduced 8, 10, 12, 15 different characters. The Ajax, son of Telamon, Menelaus, the Spartan king, Agamemnon, like so many different characters. Whereas this, it was really focused on, I guess, Odysseus, Penelope, Telemachus, and maybe one of the suitors, or it was very, very short, sharp, and focused on a couple of different characters. Now, so you could see in this that Odysseus was a two-timing, arrogant SOB full of deceit and reckless pride. Yep, a little bit, but he was also a very clever, strong, loyal warrior who was respectful to others, and in the Greek style, where they add the adjective before the person, much enduring Odysseus. He was much enduring. He constantly was picking himself up after one setback after another and progressing forward. So it was nice to see that additional character development. With all that being said, though, I personally enjoyed the Iliad more. I found it more engaging. I found the characters more vivid, and the scenery. I guess because it was all focused in one place, I could really create this this scene in my head, this imagination of what it actually was like. Whereas with the Odyssey, Odysseus goes through so many different trials, and it almost feels a bit rushed in that, there's tons of things I love in it. The monsters, the foreign lands, the gods, the different people in it. Like, there's all these different things which capture my attention, which I love, but it almost feels too rushed, and I can't really get into it. Like, as soon as they introduce the Cyclops that traps him in the cave, like, he kills him, or doesn't kill him, he blinds him, and then he's off on another adventure. The muses, not the muses, the sirens who, seduce men with their call of their beautiful singing, but who would actually dash their ship against the rocks. It just goes so quick. And there's all these little ones where I was like, man, I'd love to know more about this. Why couldn't it focus more on this one particular aspect? So in summary, it did feel a little bit too drawn out. That being said, I loved all of the different things. It was more, perhaps the book needed to be longer so that he could give more explanation of these different things. But then it wouldn't feel like as much of a trial, I guess, as it was. So I wanted more specific details and connections with events, but maybe that would have made the book even worse. Who knows? So in all, I'm giving the Odyssey by Homer a 6 out of 10. A little bit, I prefer the Iliad, so if you're going to read one of them, that's my personal recommendation, but both are, decent books, and will give you the Homerific style, the ancient Greek sagas, that style. You'll get both of that from both of these books. Now, what's something pragmatic I'm going to take? Well, I want to be more hospitable and generous when being a host. What I noticed is that if I compared myself as a host when I have friends around, when I have random people coming, or friends of friends, or things like that, I'm definitely not as hospitable in the sense of making sure that I'm personally taking my time, or time and energy and money and whatnot to make the experience of my guests as great as it could be. And what I just saw in this book was like, oh wow, there's way different levels. Like, you can go up to very, very high levels of being a good host. So I think that's something I need to work on a little bit. So that's something pragmatic I'm going to try and take from this: be a better host. that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Hope I didn't ramble too much. It's been a little bit of a time since I've done my last book review. So even though they've been coming out regularly, I pre-recorded a bunch of them. So this one is, not as good as I think it could have been, but I'm always trying to improve. So if you have any suggestions for improvements, leave it in the comments, or send me a message on Instagram or wherever you want to do. That would be awesome. And I really hope you enjoyed this. So that's it for today. Kyrin out.